Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about 2001 Interstellar? Stick around and find out. Dum, 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 bum, bum. Ba 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 bum bum ba dum 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 bum bum ba dum 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 ba 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 dum 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 dum. All right. So, Interstellar, just saw it today. Let me make sure this might be a little bit too close to me. The synopsis that IMDb, well, forget what IMDb says. In the future, humanity's run out of food. We've got plenty of fuel and other stuff, but food we're having problems with. And so they send this small group of astronauts into space to try and find a place on the other side of a wormhole that we can all migrate to. Matthew McConaughey is kind of the lead pilot guy, and he's got to leave his like 10-year-old daughter and like teenish something son behind with his father-in-law. His wife passed away, and leave for who knows how long because of the time difference, which will involve him being away for decades, maybe, even though it will just seem like, days or something like that for him. Anyway, blah 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 blah. So this is a Christopher Nolan movie. You would know him from what's that movie with the big wrapping around and Inception, and the surprise, the what do you call it? The magicians do at the end, the reprise, the what's that called? I don't know, whatever it's called. What's that? Oh, The Prestige. My wife tells me. Yes, The Prestige, and of course the 3 Batman movies. And I figured out with this movie kind of his thing. Nolan seems to like to use scripts that have these kind of outlandish ideas in them, but try to present them in a visual way that is very grounded and not fantastical looking. And that's certainly true with this movie. Let's talk about the story a little bit. This is a sci-fi drama, make no mistake. It's not like a sci-fi action movie. It's not a movie really even about exploration. It's a sci-fi drama, or at least that's the intent. It is a bit slow, but it has bursts of intense suspense that I really wish there would have been a lot more of. Let's see, the runtime, I would say, in general, and the editing of the whole thing, it clocks in at 2 hours and 45 minutes, which seems a little indulgent on the part of, or on behalf of Christopher Nolan. I feel like this could have been told in less time. Maybe not a ton less time, but I think they could have cut about 20 minutes from this thing and it would have been a better movie for it. It was just a little bit slower. They just had things in there that didn't need to be there. Maybe it was because it was trying to be too many things that lacked focus. I mean, is this a family drama? Is this a suspense movie? Is this a exploration movie? Is this a concept driven movie? Or, what is this animal? And I think they were trying to be a lot of different things that were just resulted in a longer runtime rather than, being the rich experience that it maybe set out to be. I made the comparative reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and this feels like a spiritual remake of 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I say that because, it involves, kind of this space exploration thing. And it has just kind of some beats and things that are similar. Some visual designs. There's like they have these robots that kind of help out the astronauts, and they remind me of kind of like the monolith. They just kind of like have this stark cube, rectangular, whatever you call that kind of shape. And the design is really cool, but they're just little bits. And the way that they'll show the astronaut and his helmet, and they'll show like what he's looking at reflected in the glass of the helmet. These very 2001 kinds of things going on. Not to mention a climax that basically takes some thematic ideas that they were playing with throughout the movie, and then suddenly takes them out of the realm of theme and makes those things the actual story on this kind of not supernatural, maybe metaphysical or something, but it just gets kind of wonky at the end in the same way that 2001: A Space Odyssey gets wonky. Now, not as wonky as 2001's ending, which is just like, what the crap? Okay, why did I sit here for all this time if you're just going to do this crazy stuff? And that's a little bit what I felt like as I was getting to the last half hour of of what is this movie called again? Not Inception. I can't even remember what this movie's called. Interstellar. Yeah, I was just like, okay, they're just getting weird. Why don't you just turn into a space baby and roll the credits so I can get out of here? You know. Now on that note, on the idea of this kind of crazy metaphysical stuff and stuff like that, it is mostly and primarily a sci-fi movie, but the fiction. This fiction part of science fiction is really, I think, the stronger part of the two. The science part, maybe not so much. Now, I'm not a science guy, but there are just certain ways that they are portraying black holes, wormholes, gravity, and time, and the relationship between gravity and time, and the logic seems very selective. Like they were able to have gravity distort time and do some crazy stuff, but nobody seemed ever to be in danger of being squished or ripped apart by these insane gravitational forces that were also strong enough to be stretching and shrinking time, you know? So the logic was very selective. And that felt weird to me because Nolan has this very grounded approach to the way he makes his movies, and they're fairly emotionally grounded, but just the tone overall is this kind of like he's going for this realistic kind of thing. And so when you have these scientific ideas, quote unquote, that are just stretched and they just kind of are there, and the writer just does whatever the crap he wants with them to serve the story that he wants to tell, rather than worrying about the logic of it. It just seems inconsistent. I almost would have preferred that this thing was more visually fantastical and experimental and stuff like that to go along with the somewhat strange way that they're asking us to view gravity and certain scientific ideas. Now, again, maybe you're a science guy and you'll be able to put in the comments below that oh, actually, Peter, this was completely, great and stuff like that. Well, then they did a crappy job of explaining it. So, and I would love to get your input if you're a science person, and you can actually confirm my suspicions that they're just doing crazy things with these scientific concepts in this movie that really shouldn't be done, and with any hope of having them make sense in the end. So let's see here. I think if this was Christopher Nolan's first movie, they never would have let this go on for 2 hours and 45 minutes. That said, it wasn't boring. It was just kind of slow, and I was just kind of waiting. It was like, okay, well, let's advance to the next plot point. Well, I think we've established that shot just fine. Let's move on. Let's talk about the cast and performances. You got a lot of familiar faces in this movie. You got Matthew McConaughey, Anne Hathaway, Matt Damon, which I forgot was going to be in the movie. He kind of comes in later on, and Michael Caine, who I think is contractually obligated to be in every Christopher Nolan movie until he's dead. They all did great jobs. These were solid. I mean, what they were asking of them in terms of like the family drama stuff and the drama side of what this thing is, they did a wonderful job with. They all really delivered great, solid performances. So I have absolutely no complaints there. Regarding the stunts and visuals, as I said, Nolan does like to ground things quite a bit. I think sometimes to the detriment of his movies. But I liked the way that he was using effects, both practical and digital, in this movie. Like I said, they had these kind of rectangular kind of robot things, AI things that would assist the astronauts, and they were really interesting. I mean, just the simplicity of their shape was just kind of unexpected given what we're used to seeing in science fiction, and so that was neat. But also the versatility, despite that very simple visual design, was really interesting to watch, to see how they worked and how they would surprise you, but without doing things that you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's totally unrealistic, and that function would not make any sense with the form that they've been given. It's just interesting, all the functionality they can bring out of that very simplistic design. Likewise, the black holes, the wormholes, the way those ideas are demonstrated is almost like a mirror bending effect. Like if you have a flexible mirror and you bend it and you see that it stretches an image or it shrinks it or something like that, that's kind of what they did to what you were seeing in scenes whenever there was kind of like a gravity or time bending kind of an effect. And so it was very simple, but at the end of the day, I have to think that if we were capable of witnessing something like that kind of gravitational distortion of space or time, that it would probably look more like that than it would like purple gaseous lightning or something like that. So that was neat, and I thought it was done in a visually interesting way, despite how grounded it was. The score on this is pretty interesting. Again, I referenced 2001: A Space Odyssey because it had that kind of classical kind of sound to the score, and in this one they had like a big pipe organ as a main component of the score throughout the entire movie, which gave it this kind of gothic sensibility, this kind of archaic, ancient, epic, legendary kind of feel to it. It's very, very hard to describe, but I thought the organ was used to great effect. It was unexpected, but I think it fit the tone that Nolan was going for. There's also tons of bass. I don't know what this thing will be like on home video, but in the theaters, they really like to work out those subwoofers. I mean, it's for like tons of this movie. There was also, again, some Christopher Nolan dialogue issues. In all of the movies I've seen of his, there always seems to be at least one, usually many more times, where I have trouble understanding the dialogue. A prime example of this that was very pervasive throughout the movie was in The Dark Knight Rises, where you've got Bane talking like this the whole time, and he's saying things, and they're very interesting, and he's using lots of interesting inflection, and you're like, what the crap is he saying? And so, at home, you put it on subtitles, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that only cropped up here in, I think, one scene, maybe two, but in one scene, it was really bad because it was like this pivotal moment where this pivotal new information was being given that totally changed the direction of the movie, and I could only guess that I was right in what they said. I was like, I think he just said this. If he said this, that's a huge game changer, but is that what he said? I don't know. I guess I'll just have to watch and see how everybody reacts to it and hope that somebody restates it at some point, which eventually they did. But that was, really bad timing to not be able to understand what your actors are saying. Okay, so let's talk about like the themes and stuff going on in this movie. There is a ton of stuff that could be talked about in this movie. Let's see here. There's the idea of naturalism is certainly explored. That's certainly one of the major philosophies being represented in this movie, and yet it seems to me that the writers and maybe the directors, but I'll just say the filmmakers, it seems to me that they want to validate and embrace a lot of ideas that spring out of naturalism, the kind of this anti-supernatural thing, but at the same time they want to hold on to love. And the way they try to kind of make those two compatible is by saying that love is something that is non-physical, and can't be quantified by science right now, but maybe it will be able to be quantified at some point. It's just kind of this multi-dimensional kind of thing that eventually could be quantified, and I think that's interesting because one thing ever since reading, I'm letting my dad borrow it. But ever since reading a book by Dr. Hugh Ross, an astrophysicist who's also a believer, he in one of his books called Beyond the Cosmos talked about what science is learning about higher dimensions, the multiple dimensions that exist above and beyond the four that we exist in. And there was some really interesting conclusions that he came to regarding spiritual matters, regarding the character of God, regarding, say, the compatibility of predestination and free will at the same time, and how the existence of multiple dimensions above the ones that we're operating in make those kinds of things possible. And there's all kinds of questions that can be answered, or at least can be assumed to be answerable, if we factor in the higher dimensions above our own. And this movie was tapping into some of that same kind of foundation for some of its arguments. So and I think that's interesting because I think that these, for example, in this movie, there are some supernatural ideas being expressed. Or like there's a theme of ghosts, okay? And I'll try not to give any spoilers here, but they, you start with ghosts and you have this kind of supernatural, mysterious idea, and you're like, well, that's just kind of magic. It's chaotic. It's unexplainable. There's no logic to that, and so we kind of a lot of us put any kind of spiritual things, angels, God, our spiritual component of who we are, we kind of put that in the realm of, oh, that's just kind of, magic. Or especially I would say non-believers would say, oh, that's just like believing in magic. There's no logic. It's all just kind of chaotic and just, there's no thinking involved. There's no, but we see in scripture that God is not a God of chaos. He's not a God of meaninglessness. He's a God of order. And one of the things that they do in this movie is try to take some non-natural ideas, some non-physical concepts, and suggest that they are logical and that they are within the realm of logical thinking, but they just are operating on a dimensional level above our own, which is why, from our perspective, they are untestable, they're unverifiable. But the idea suggested that eventually these things that we think of as non-physical or spiritual, whatever, they will be quantifiable at some point. And I'm very comfortable with that. I don't think that's kind of like in some way taking away anything from who God is, from who angels and demons are. I'm very comfortable with the idea that angels are not like the kind of uh, wispy, ethereal, who knows what, just kind of like fairies or something like that. I'm very comfortable with the idea that they are extra dimensional beings. And so the idea of dimensions and stuff like that is something that is played with and used as a foundation for presenting ideas in this movie. And so it's very interesting in that regard. Again, I'm seeing a growing trend little by little in movies to allow naturalism's ugly side to be revealed for what it is. If there is nothing but Darwinian evolution, if there's nothing but a purely natural existence, then it follows that survival of the fittest, all those things, those are the highest law, and we all really ought to be as selfish as we can be, so that we'll survive, or so that our children will survive, or whatever we can do to further the existence of the species in the future, is justifiable. Well, there is a character who has that view in this movie, who's a great coward and very selfish. And he even kind of argues from the standpoint of self-preservation, and how that's a very strong and necessary component of evolution. And so this character who represents the naturalistic Darwinian evolutionary worldview, is shown to be a coward and very, very selfish. And that's interesting. I'm seeing more and more movies kind of recognize that that when you naturally apply, I'm not, again, and I've said this before, but I want to say it again. I'm not saying that if you hold to a completely naturalistic Darwinian evolutionary worldview, that you can't have morals, that you can't value love and those kinds of things. I'm just saying that you have to be pulling those from somewhere else, or just deciding I'm going to believe in them even though they don't make sense, because they don't naturally spring out of a completely 100% naturalistic worldview. So anyway, it's just interesting to see that reality being demonstrated in a character who's representing that worldview in a movie. Let's see here. This movie, at the end of the day, is still, though, very humanistic. It affirms nothing greater than humans and human potential. There is certainly room for where they're going to go in explaining some of the mysterious things that happen in this movie, and what could those things be, and who might be out there, and whatever. And at the end of the day, I think that the statement that this movie is making is really just, I don't think it's saying that there's nothing out there other than human life. But as in terms of like God or angels or aliens or whatever like that, but I think in the end, the only thing it is affirming, and only thing it's wanting to affirm, is humans, and humans are awesome, and we have so much potential, and we will eventually be even more awesome. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's a pretty humanistic worldview being expressed. So what would I say in the end if I were a time traveler and talking to myself back in time before I saw this movie? I would say, Pater, just wait on this one. You don't got to see it right now. In fact, Redbox it at best, $1.50, or just wait or borrow it from somebody. I mean, you won't necessarily want to spend time and money on this movie. It's interesting, but it's 2 hours and 45 minutes. So I would say wait until you've got time to kill, and it will be cheaper for you to watch, and then check it out. It does have some interesting things going on, but this is, I think, a movie that's not really innovative. It borrows so much in terms of its feel from 2001: A Space Odyssey, rather than really innovating on its own to create a new movie a movie that feels totally different and was innovative in the same way that 2001 was. This is a little bit more of kind of a remix of kind of how 2001 felt, I think. So yeah, you can wait on this, in my opinion. It's rated PG-13 for some intense, perilous action and brief, strong language. In the end, I give it a quality score of 7.5. So this is not a bad movie, but it's just not a really good movie for what it is. If it was 20 minutes shorter, maybe that would bump it up to an 8. Let's see here. And in terms of relevance, I give it an 8.0 out of 10. That means that this is solid, that there's a lot that you could talk about, certainly, and it would be pretty easy to get that conversation started, or at least get those thoughts started in your own mind. However, it doesn't get a higher score because I think a lot of people are just going to watch this movie and just kind of like, they'll be content to just kind of leave it behind, just because it wasn't this really riveting experience, and it was a little bit slow sometimes. And so at the end of the day, I think it's fairly forgettable. So there you go. 7.5 quality, 8.0 relevance. Please do like, share, and subscribe if you like this video and want to share it and want more videos like it. And then also give me your thoughts on this movie after seeing it. Like I said, I think there's a lot to talk about. I'd love to get your thoughts after you see it, or maybe just let me know if you're not planning on touching this with a 10-foot pole for whatever reason. And then also, I totally forgot to use my actor sign. Oh, crap, I keep forgetting that. But, I mean, you remember what all these actors look like. I mean, Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway and Michael Caine and... yeah, so here's the one. Boom! For info about that scoring system and tons of other content and community, visit ChristianGeekCentral.com. I hope you'll come and join us there soon as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.